What has been one piece of advice you've heard in your times playing Tarkov? Something that is universally said across the board because it is so powerful and it can make or break fights depending on the situation. That is, to do your best in taking fights with a right side peek. What this means is approaching a wall or any piece of cover that's in front of you and leaning to your right, thus exposing the smallest amount of your body as possible, which will help keep you alive. Anyone who has triple-digit hours in the game usually says this to people who are newer and are looking for ways to die a little less often. And while this advice is very sound, I've always been under the notion that these situations can sometimes be avoided entirely by playing more from range whenever possible. Obviously, if you're a low level and don't have access to any of the scopes or the flea market to get scopes, that's fair. But not allowing yourself to be put in those situations where a peek can make or break a fight is usually my preferred advice. But all that is about to potentially change, because BSG with the winter patch is adding the ability to quickly put your weapon against your left shoulder and shoot from an entirely new angle. This could remove Tarkov's weirdest quirk of the game, which is the advantage of being always on the right side. Now, the ability to shoulder your weapon to the left, you will be able to take fights from more unconventional angles and approach the game with an entirely new lens to it. There are so many major changes coming to us in the winter patch, which is quickly approaching, and it's hard to discern which one might have the greatest impact, but my hope is that this update is something people really take advantage of, instead of being one of those cool additions that kinda gets forgotten about, which has happened before in the past. So if you're excited about the new changes and the potential impact of shoulder shooting from the left it might have on in the game, be sure to subscribe to the channel for future videos about using these mechanics when they are added. Left shoulder shooting is something the community at large has asked for years to be implemented into the game. It never really made sense that such a well-trained PMC couldn't be able to swap their weapon to the other side of their body should the situation call for it. And while I understand from a programming perspective how much of a nightmare this must have been to add into the game, from a gameplay perspective, it just makes sense to be able to do it. And now we will be able to do it. What this opens up for players is the ability to tackle fights from any angle, perspective, or direction with a greater degree of freedom. The feeling of always having to constantly focus your attention so that you peek for other players from the right side was a muscle memory that took time to develop. But now, a brand new muscle memory will be needed to figure out. The animation itself is exactly what people were hoping for, a quick and simple swap to the left shoulder. Now, the PMC doesn't go through with it all the way and switch their hand positions and everything else, but rather, as explained by Nikita himself, it's a quick and temporary way to get the benefits of peeking from the left without exposing your entire body like we normally do in the game currently. To be honest, looking at the weapons from their left side is really strange. We never saw that half of the gun in Tarkov unless you inspected them. In Raid, we're just so used to seeing only one half of it, but now we get to see the entire weapon. Even if it does look a little strange, I'm sure we'll get used to it after being exposed to it for a short period of time. But now the bigger question that looms overhead is, what kind of new angles are people going to be able to shoot safely from? And that's a great question because now we get to look at Tarkov from a completely different lens. The game and the meta of peeking safely has been figured out to a dangerously accurate degree. But now, well, the sky's the limit. Who knows what kinds of angles people are going to figure out with this newfound opportunity and ability to peek from the opposite side everyone says is so dominant. My biggest concern with this addition is that people don't use it. That's it, really. This is something that can be game-changing should enough people remember to interact with it at all. Because as awesome as this is, it's one of those changes that can very quickly become forgotten or irrelevant because something else pops up that catches everybody's attention. I know I will be making a conceited effort to really use and potentially abuse this mechanic to see what it's capable of, but I also know not everyone plays Tarkov that way. I'm the weirdo that likes to use obtuse weapons, not min-max everything, and try to play the game generally in unconventional ways. It's just how I enjoy Tarkov personally after all these years. And again, I'm not saying it's the right way or the only way. The beauty of this game is how freeform it really is in terms of running your raids, and the ability to peek from the left side is just another way of expressing that. Alongside left shoulder shooting, the new recoil system that has been iterated on for months now seems to be in the game with this build, and while it's not final still, the actual recoil of the weapons looks much more reasonable than what it is currently now for moderately modded weapons. There was something about the weapon sway in the video that was extremely unappealing to the eye, however. Half the time the PMC was shooting, the reticle for the red dot was off screen and not even visible. So there is something funky going on in that regard that I fear might sneak its way into the game, but the actual recoil of the weapon looks better, which makes me very happy. The best part about this is that they have this recoil on the ETS servers for anyone who has access to them and can provide feedback, which means they really want to knock this part of it out of the park. I wonder what the difference will be now for a weapon that barely has any parts on it versus one that is best in slot. We will have to get our hands on it, and luckily for us, day one of the wipe will be the easiest time to figure it out because everybody's going to be running around with stock weapons. And if this performs well, I can only imagine what modified guns are going to feel like. But all these changes together in a single patch means that weapons in Escape from Tarkov are going to feel the most different that they've ever felt. And while I am nervous about recoil and weapon sway, I'm also very eager to get in there and just play with stuff to see how everything feels. This entire winter patch is arguably one of the largest and game-changing updates to Tarkov that we have ever received. It's insane looking back at the roadmap BSG put out earlier this year and seeing almost everything on that roadmap come in this single patch. I imagine there might be some day one wipe problems because of this, and it's just that expansive of an update, with vaulting, updated armor hitboxes, and now left shoulder swapping. Just these alone could warrant a wipe patch, but there is still more going on behind the scenes. All of this on top of Arena hopefully coming out very, very soon, and it's a really good time to be a Tarkov fan. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are regarding left shoulder shooting or anything that's coming out with this winter update, and be sure to subscribe for more videos about these changes when they are put into the game and what the consensus is across the entire community. I hope to see you in future ones.